Something strange is happening in American politics. The network that has defended Donald Trump through impeachments, indictments, and every controversy imaginable is now openly questioning him. Not MSNBC, not CNN, Fox News. And the reason is a tiny Arctic island most Americans couldn't find on a map a year ago, Greenland. Here's the short version for anyone just catching up. Since early 2025, President Trump has pushed to bring Greenland, a self-governing territory that belongs to the Kingdom of Denmark, under American control. At various points, he has floated buying it, pressuring it, and refused to fully rule out using military force to take it. Denmark and Greenland have both said repeatedly and clearly that the island is not for sale. In January 2026, the standoff escalated fast. Trump threatened tariffs of up to 25% on Denmark and 7 other European allies unless they agreed to hand over the territory. Greenland's government actually published a public safety handbook telling residents to stockpile food, water, and fuel in case of a crisis. That is not a normal week in international relations. Then came the letter that changed everything. A message that's now being called Dear Jonas after its opening line to Norway's Prime Minister, Jonas. In it, Trump complained that Norway had denied him the Nobel Peace Prize, claiming he personally stopped 8 wars. Plus, he then wrote that because he didn't win the prize, he no longer felt, in his words, an obligation to think purely of peace before demanding what he called complete and total control of Greenland. Let's slow down on that for a second because it deserves it. The Nobel Peace Prize is not awarded by the Norwegian government. It's awarded by an independent 5-member Norwegian Nobel Committee. Norway's own prime minister publicly reminded Trump of that fact more than once. The 2025 prize actually went to Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. And here's the detail that's almost too strange to believe. Reporting confirms that Machado later gave Trump her own Nobel medal as a symbolic gesture. He still didn't let it go. Even when directly asked on camera whether the missed award influenced his Greenland push, Trump denied it. And then in practically the same breath accused Norway of secretly controlling the prize anyway. The letter didn't stop at the Nobel Prize. It kept going, and honestly, it reads less like presidential correspondence and more like an argument at a family dinner. Let's go through it. First claim, Denmark cannot protect that land from Russia or China. Here's the fact. Greenland is part of NATO. Denmark is a NATO member. Neither Russia nor China has attempted to invade Greenland. China's closest point to Greenland is roughly 5,000 miles away. Russia is closer, but any approach would mean crossing the Arctic Ocean, a genuinely brutal logistical challenge because of weather, ice, and basic physics. Second claim. Why do they have a right of ownership anyway? There are no written documents. It's only that a boat landed there hundreds of years ago. Here's the fact. Denmark's claim to Greenland rests on centuries of governance, treaties, and international recognition, not a single boat landing. And on the history point specifically, Norse settlers reached Greenland around the year 986, roughly 500 years before the first European settlements in the Americas, and 800 years before the United States existed as a country. Third claim, I have done more for NATO than any other person since its founding. Here's the fact. This is the same letter threatening to fracture the alliance by pressuring a member state to give up sovereign territory. NATO's Secretary General Mark Rutte had to personally step in to de-escalate the situation at the Davos summit in January 2026. By the time you finish reading the full letter, you start to understand why senators from both parties reacted the way they did. One senator called it unhinged and embarrassing. Others openly questioned Trump's fitness for office. That's not spin. That's the actual reaction from elected officials who read the letter. Here's what makes this story different from a normal partisan fight. This isn't a Fox versus everyone else story. Multiple Fox News personalities have openly said the Greenland push is baffling and unpopular. Polling has shown that an overwhelming majority of Americans across party lines do not support a military option in Greenland. That includes a large share of self-identified Republicans. When a president's own core media base starts publicly pushing back, that's usually a sign the story has moved from political controversy to something genuinely unusual happening. So why does any of this matter if you don't live in Greenland or Denmark? Because the economic fallout wouldn't stay local. The European Union is one of the largest economic blocs in the world. If this standoff had spiraled into a real trade war, the EU had reportedly discussed using its most powerful retaliatory tool, sometimes called the trade bazooka, an anti-coercion instrument that could target major U.S. exports and services. Analysts warned this could have hit everything from American corporate value in European markets to the stability of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. There's also the military dimension. The U.S. operates major bases across Europe. including in Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom. Straining the alliance over Greenland puts America's entire forward military posture in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa at risk, not just one Arctic island. The good news, the crisis did partially cool down. At the Davos summit in January 2026, Trump walked back the tariff threats and said military action was, quote, not on the table. But as of mid-2026, the underlying tension over Greenland's future has not actually gone away. It's simply moved to a quieter phase of negotiation, with Denmark's government still having to manage the standoff. While the Greenland story dominated headlines, a separate controversy was unfolding closer to home. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem faced sharp questioning after reports that immigration enforcement operations in cities like Minneapolis involved asking people, including U.S. citizens, to prove their citizenship on the street. Legal analysts were quick to point out the constitutional problem here. Officers generally need what's called reasonable suspicion before they can stop and question someone for immigration purposes. It's a lower bar than criminal law requires, but it's still a real legal standard, not a blanket authority to demand ID from anyone, anywhere, for any reason. So where does this leave things? A sitting U.S. president tied a major foreign policy decision, one that put a 77-year-old military alliance at risk, to personal frustration over not winning an award. Fox News hosts, usually reliable allies, openly called it baffling. Senators from both parties questioned his judgment, and polling shows the public, including most Republicans, wants no part of a military solution. Whatever your politics, this is a story worth watching closely because the Greenland standoff isn't really about one island. It's a stress test for NATO, for the dollar's role in the global economy, and for how far a president can stretch a personal grievance into national policy. If you want to stay current on how this plays out, subscribe and drop your take in the comments. Should Congress be doing more to check this kind of foreign policy decision-making? Let me know below.